Welcome everyone. My name is Denise Reagan. I am from the Garden Club of Jacksonville, and we are here for bird habitats, the latest Horticulture Corner program. We're so excited to have you all here. I know that birds are a very popular topic, given the number of people that are here with us in person and on Zoom. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Denise Reagan. I'm the Executive Director of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, and I'm here with my colleague, Daniel Stark, our Operations Manager, who is helping facilitate this Zoom and in-person hybrid program. We cannot have programs like this without the generous grant, I should say, from the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund, who makes programs like this possible for us, and we're so grateful. And I'd also like to thank our Horticulture Corner Chair, Wally Eriks, who is checking people in as we speak. All right. I wanted to let you know about a couple of upcoming horticulture programs while I have your rapt attention. Our next horticulture program is a partnership with many different organizations: the Duval Audubon Society, the Ixia Chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society, the Northeast Florida Sierra Club have joined together with the Garden Club to present Grow Your Own Park with Doug Tallamy of Homegrown National Park. It is an amazing program. I invite you to go ahead and look at homegrownnationalpark.org to find out more about this great effort that Doug has put together. It's a national effort, a way to connect all the great national parks that we have out there by planting native plants in your yard so that we can create native habitats across the United States. All right, so please join us. That is March 3rd. That is the Thursday, and it will be a little bit different format because we'll have Doug Tallamy joining us by Zoom. And then we have a panel of people from Duval Audubon, Ixia, and the Sierra Club who will talk about ways to do what he's trying to do here in Jacksonville. We'll also have a native plant sale that will be available and a book signing as well. So it's a really fun evening of programming. After that, we have Horticulture Corner container gardens. We have Jen and Brandy Burnham of Lush Leaves who do amazing work at their store, and they're going to be talking about how you can make beautiful container gardens. Little hint, there's a big plant sale right before this program at the Garden Club, and you can buy a lot of plants that you can maybe put into a container garden. So great combination of ideas coming together there. And then the one after that is bonsai. We have Joshua Brown of the North Florida Bonsai Club, and he'll be talking about the art and science of bonsai. And that'll be really, I've been fascinated with bonsai for a long time. I know nothing about them, but I will learn along with all of you. All right, so that's a little hint of what's going on in the future. If you're not already a member of the Garden Club, I invite you to please consider becoming a member of the Garden Club. We do amazing programs like this, which is a free program for everyone, but we also do lots of programs where members get a very large discount. And there's all sorts of reasons to join. Sometimes it's just to support the environmental cause that we all care so deeply about. Sometimes it's for the camaraderie and the fellowship, but please consider joining the Garden Club, and there's a link that Daniel is putting into the chat on Zoom, and you can also see us or the registration desk for more information. All right, I'm so excited to be introducing Jody Willis. Jody is a former president of the Duval Audubon Society and has held several board positions in the chapter over the last 20 years. She is also a member of the Ixia Chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society, the Florida Wildflower Foundation, Herb Society of America, and the Yucca Circle of the Ribault Garden Club. She has been an avid gardener for many years and has been cultivating native plants in her yard since she moved to Jacksonville in 1999. Willis previously worked as a market manager with CSX and Conrail and as a financial advisor with the Ameriprise Financial Services. She has a bachelor's degree from Regis College in Boston and an MBA from Syracuse University. Willis has learned that gardening is a never-ending and rewarding learning experience, especially in regards to the creatures that inhabit the gardens we create. If you have questions for Jody during the program, please hold them till the end, and we will, if you're on Zoom, we will take them out of the chat and ask Jody here in person. And if you have them, Daniel has a microphone, and you please raise your hand and he'll come to you because we want to get your question on the recording, because that's very important to us. All right, so without further ado, let me give you Jody Willis.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Okay, great. Next slide, please. Okay, so why do we want to plant a native habitat for birds? Well, bird populations in the United States and Canada have decreased by 29% over the last 50 years. And that translates into a loss of 3 billion birds in less than the average human lifespan. Next slide. So what are the main causes of this bird population loss? Well, the number one cause is habitat loss. The second cause is killings by outdoor cats and feral cats, followed by collisions with buildings and cars and chemicals in the environment. So today we're going to focus on habitat loss and how we can mitigate it. Next slide. All right, habitat loss is a double whammy. Loss of habitat to a bird means less food supply, less nesting area, less roosting and resting area, and a greater expenditure of energy to find food and survive. By the way, this is a picture of a Bachman's sparrow, which is a very shy, uncommon sparrow, usually skulking along in the grass. Oh, next slide, please. Excuse me. Habitat loss is also responsible for the insect apocalypse. At least 1/3 of the world's food supply is dependent upon pollinators, bees, butterflies, moths, wasps, and other insects for the pollination of our food. Next slide. So what does the insect apocalypse mean for birds? Well, to give you an example, a clutch of baby chickadees requires 350 to 570 caterpillars per day to grow and survive. Oh, not yet.
Sorry, yeah, we're back.
So almost all birds will require insects such as caterpillars to grow, even birds that will mature into seed eaters later on. So the equation is very simple. No insects equals no birds, and no native plants equals no insects. Next slide. So lack of native habitat means that birds and insects must search for food for longer periods of time. So this taxes their endurance and burns precious energy that they need to survive. This is a picture, by the way, of a northern mockingbird and a wonderful native plant, the Yaupon holly. They love their berries. Another thing to note is probably the average territory of a bumblebee is about 2.5 miles. So once again, if they have to travel longer than that, it decreases their ability to survive and find food. So why native plants? Well, native plants require less water, pesticides, and fertilizers than non-native species, and they save you time and money on maintenance, and they help you reduce carbon pollution. Reducing carbon pollution helps slow down climate change. This picture is my front garden from last summer, and that's purple coneflower and black-eyed Susan. Next slide. So what do birds and insects need? Well, they need food, water, and cover. And they can only live where all of these needs are met. So Florida's plants and animals, from bears to insects, have co-evolved over thousands of years, and they've created a complex and wondrous web of interdependence. And this is a picture of a common ground dove from my yard. They need food. An ideal landscape uses native plants to provide a year-round food supply, such as berries, fruit, seeds, and nuts. And this is a picture of pokeberry, which is a plant that's native to the United States and Canada. It has several different descriptive names. It's called the red ink plant because it was used by the Native Americans for dye. It's called pigeonberry because it was a favorite food of the extinct passenger pigeon. And it's also called crowberry because it's a favorite food of crows. The flowers are attractive to the pollinators and bees, and the berries ripen in the fall, just in time for migrating birds. So blue jays, cardinals, thrushes, waxwings, woodpeckers, orioles, titmice, finches, etc. They all love the berries. Now, the only thing I can say is if you do have children, I wouldn't plant this because the berries are toxic to humans, so you don't want your kids getting sick. And there's plenty of other berry-producing shrubs that you can use instead, such as Japan holly, which you saw, American beautyberry. Firebush also has berries on it. So they need water. Water, of course, is essential to all wildlife. So it can be something as simple as a bird bath, or it can be as elaborate as a pond or a waterfall. I wish this was my yard, but it's not. Next slide, please. They need cover. Okay, the cover comes from trees and shrubs that gives them protection to breed, nest, hide, sleep, and feed. And cover can be from living trees or dead trees. Woodpeckers and bluebirds, for example, will nest in the cavity of a dead tree, and dead trees also provide insects for food. And this is a picture of a screech owl in a dead tree. I had a dead tree in my yard a couple years ago. It was in the back. It wasn't going to fall on the house or on my neighbor's fence or anything. And I was able to watch a family of red-bellied woodpeckers raise their young in it. It was wonderful. So I encourage you, if you've got a dead tree in your yard and it's not going to cause any damage, to consider leaving it up for the birds. Okay, so there's 13 steps to start in your yard. You don't have to do them all at once. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars to transform your yard. The whole key is to start small. So the first and most important step is to inventory your yard. Okay, so determine the current dimensions of the yard space that you have for plantings. Make note of what areas are in the sun and partial shade or deep shade. Examine your soil. Is it mostly fill dirt or sand or loam or topsoil? How about your soil moisture? Do you have areas that are eroded, or do you have other areas with poor drainage where you have standing water? And if you live near the beach, is your property affected by salt spray? And there are many native plants that you can plant near the beach and there won't be any problems. The next step is to inventory your current plantings. So are there invasives that you need to get rid of and replace with native plants? Do you have mostly bare ground or lawn? Do you have trees and shrubs already, which might be native? Do you have native wildlife already in your yard, such as birds and butterflies that visit your property? And this is a picture of a zebra longwing on Spanish needle. I want to stop and talk about invasives for a minute. Some of the plants that are toxic to birds, and my biggest nemesis is Nandina, heavenly bamboo. This plant, the berries are toxic to cedar waxwings, which come through here in migration in the spring and the fall. So I encourage you to get rid of your Nandina. And if you don't want to get rid of it, cut the berries off and keep them cut off. Okay, invasives also bring disastrous pests, which can destroy native plants and disrupt the ecosystem. The most glaring example of this is the American chestnut. Now, this used to be the most common tree in the eastern deciduous forest for millions of years. And then the chestnut blight came to North America when the nurseries imported the Japanese chestnut, which was resistant to the blight. This tree was reduced to a number of stumps in one generation. It's taken the Herculean effort of the American Chestnut Society to bring this tree back from the brink of extinction. And what they did was they crossbred the remaining species they had with resistant Asian species. And then they back-crossed this offspring with the American chestnut. And hopefully in a few years, they will have blight-resistant seeds to plant. Next page. And here is one we all know, kudzu. Invasives such as this muscle out native plants for survival. And this is a particularly aggressive plant, as we well know, and it smothers native plants wherever it grows. So invasives impact our insect populations. They have very specific diets and they cannot adapt to invasives. Let me explain. Most insects are specialists, which means they can only live in a specific native species of tree, bush, or plants. Now, to give you an example, with our native oak species, there are probably about 534 species of moths and butterflies that depend on our native oak species. And of course, all of those are food for birds. Now, birds themselves are generalists. If a bird sees a berry and it's hungry, it's going to eat it. It's not going to stop to think that this is an invasive berry. Also, if it's being chased by a hawk, it's going to dive into an invasive plant to avoid the hawk. So, next slide. Okay, so step 3, go organic. Never use pesticides or herbicides in your yard. Use slow release or organic fertilizers only when absolutely necessary. The fertilizers end up in our waterways and they cause algae blooms. Neonicotinoids such as Roundup are directly responsible for the disastrous decline of our pollinators and other insect populations. Now, Duval Audubon, St. John's Audubon, Florida Native Plant Society, St. John's Riverkeeper, and the Garden Clubs of America all oppose the use of this pesticide. Now, there is a growing number of countries and states that have restricted or banned this particular pesticide. I mean, this is due to the potential link to cancer in humans as well. Now, California has led the charge in the United States, followed by Connecticut. Other states, including Florida, have banned it for use in public areas on a city-by-city basis. In Florida, Miami, Key West, and Stewart have done this. Jacksonville has not. My position is this pesticide should be banned everywhere permanently, like DDT was. Next, please. Cater to both the birds and the insects. Use native plants which have fruit or nectar eaten by birds and butterflies, and plants which attract insects as birds eat insects. So examples of this are American beautyberry, spotted bee balm, and firebush. This is a picture of the American beautyberry, which is a wonderful, easy shrub to grow. It can grow in full sun or part shade, and it's tolerant of drought and cold weather. It might lose its leaves in the cold weather, but that's fine, that's normal. It's one of the best plants to attract birds to your yard. It readily spreads by self-sown seeds or cuttings. The blooms are very small, clustered, beautiful, pale lavender flowers, and they appear in the late springs and early summer, and then they mature into these wonderful lavender berries in the fall. And the birds will devour the berries. I've seen wrens, sparrows, vireos, mockingbirds, cardinals, blue jays on them. So I love this plant. And if you're so inclined, it also makes a delicious jam. Next, please. Feed the butterflies. Butterflies need larval food plants. And these plants can be completely denuded by hungry caterpillars, but no worries, they will grow back. This is a picture of a passion flower vine, which is the host plant for the Gulf fritillary. I have one in my backyard, and last summer I had 13 Gulf fritillary caterpillars on it. It was very exciting. There's other plants as well. There's milkweeds for monarchs, Spanish needle for the dainty sulfurs, and frog fruit for the Phaon crescent, the white peacock, and the common buckeye. Is that a weed? Now, everyone laughs at me about this, but I love Spanish needle. It's the third most nectar producing plant in Florida. So it's beloved by bees, butterflies, and beekeepers alike. It blooms year round, so it's always available to provide food for bees and butterflies. Now, this plant grows in other parts of the world as well as the United States. It grows in Africa, South America, Jamaica, and Asia, and it is beloved in other parts of the world. It's used to make herbal tea. You can cook the leaves as collard greens. You can use the blossoms as topping for salad. You can also crush the leaves to produce a sap that will aid in blood clotting on cuts. And it's beloved by a number of butterflies. I've seen Julias, ruddy daggerwings, monarchs, American painted ladies, common buckeyes, and again, the dainty sulfur on them. And there's other weeds as well, spiderwort, spotted bee balm, and wild poinsettia. Next slide, please. Step 7, use red flowers. There are a number of native plants with tubular red flowers that are attractive to hummingbirds, bees, butterflies, and people. These include the trumpet honeysuckle, crossvine, firebush, red buckeye, tropical sage, and the native scarlet hibiscus. And there's another one I left off of this list, the coral bean. This is a picture of a firebush, another one of my favorite plants. It's really superb for your yard because it's a major nectar producing plant and the hummingbirds love it. And the bees and butterflies as well. It does produce small reddish berries that will ripen to a purple black in the fall and be eaten by the birds. And it's a very easy plant to grow from cuttings or seed. I have one outside my den window, and I'm always very excited when I see the hummers come and feed on it in the summer. Step 8, use layers of plantings. This includes large trees, large shrubs, small shrubs, grasses, wildflowers, and vines. If you provide vegetation at every level, you are supporting animals and insects which forage and nest on the ground, in the middle of the trees, or on treetops. To give you an example, in bird nesting behavior, sparrows and wrens will nest on the ground or at mid-level in a small shrub. The mockingbirds, the blue jays, and the cardinals will nest in mid-range in the trees, and owls, hawks, and eagles will nest on the tops of trees. Don't deadhead. Flowers such as black-eyed Susan, blanket flower, and purple coneflower will provide food for both pollinators and birds. In the autumn, instead of cutting off the spent flower heads, leave them on your plants, if you're not collecting the seeds, of course. But if you can leave some of them on your plants, the finches and the other birds, when they come through in migration, will eat the seeds. And this is a blanket flower in the picture. Start replacing your lawn. When we put in lawns, we put in dead zones. That's all it is. It's a dead zone. You don't have to replace your entire yard. You can start small. And even a really small space can make a huge difference. So some examples of ground cover you can use are dune sunflower, porterweed, and frog fruit. Now, the porterweed that you see in the big box stores is an upright porterweed. That's not the native. The native porterweed is horizontal. A note on lawns. Environmental hazards caused by lawns include an estimated 59 million pounds of pesticides, which leach into our waterways. There's an estimated 7 billion gallons of water used every day, and a third of that is used to water your lawn. Pretty scary. And finally, the mowing, edging, leaf blowing emits about 26.7 million tons of pollutants per year into the atmosphere. So use leaves and grass clippings as mulch. You may worry that this will make your garden look messy, but you can edge your garden neatly. And you can also train your lawn care company to blow your leaves into your garden beds. I realize using a blower is not environmentally correct, so I rake them, so it's good exercise. But anyway, the point is to try to use them instead of using other commercial mulches. It has a number of benefits. It's free mulch, it's free fertilizer, it's free weed control, and it enriches your soil. Now, if you don't have any trees in your yard, maybe your neighbor does, and you can get his or her leaves, and then they don't put them out by the curb in plastic bags to be taken away. The only thing I would caution you on is the leaves from magnolia trees are not really great for mulch because they're so large and leathery. So they take a very long time to break down, but other leaves and grass clippings definitely use. A note on ferns. Now you try using ferns as ground cover instead of grass. And this works especially well in areas of your yard that are in deep shade. Because some of these native species, they will only grow where there's a lot of humus. Some examples of these are the cinnamon fern and the royal fern. The ferns that I see everywhere are asparagus fern and Boston fern. They are not native, they are invasive, they crowd out everything else. Please do me a favor and get rid of them, please. Next page. And if you don't have a yard, you can use containers to create a native plant habitat instead. There are wonderful native flowering vines, such as this trumpet honeysuckle picture. Of course, passion flower vine. Other native plants will grow in containers as well. Step 13, and this is important, join your HOA. Ask them to turn common areas into native plant habitats. Explain to them that it will save on your maintenance costs, and you don't need to mow, prune, fertilize, weed, spray, or replace the plantings on a regular basis. And it also will help you to provide a connected habitat for birds and insects in your community. And here's one final thought. Imagine that our world is a jet airplane. Now, we might not notice if we lose a rivet or two or suffer any consequences on any given flight over the Atlantic. But if you lose enough of them in flight, then the entire plane goes down with everyone on board. So these rivets are like those seemingly unimportant species that we're trying to save. We know too little to be so arrogant to assume that any life on this planet doesn't matter. And this is a picture of a riverkeeper, river-friendly yard from 2019 that won their annual award. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much. I know we already have a lot of questions in Zoom, and I'm sure there are lots of questions in the audience. So while you're raising your hands and Daniel is coming to you, I'm going to go ahead and ask one from Zoom. All right, so we have Flo who asks, any suggested procedures for getting rid of Nandina?
Dig it up and throw it away. Seriously, you'll have to dig it up and
Yeah.
just pull it out.
Kate Hurlbut from the Ixia chapter suggests on here, if you don't pull up your Nandina, you can cut off blossoms. I think you mentioned that. That way you won't get any berries.
Correct.
So, that's one way to keep it in check.
Yeah.
All right, and I'll go ahead and ask another question from Zoom. How do you dispose of Roundup if you have a bottle? What's the safest way to do that?
I would say, look at the instructions on the bottle itself, because I never use it, of course. So I think they have the instructions on the bottle.
Yeah, I know that the city runs a hazardous waste site that I've been to many, many times. You also take your electronics there. I have a whole garage full of electronics that I had to take over there. So that's probably the best thing is to take it to them.
Yes.
And they know how to dispose of it safely, I would say.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we have a question in the audience.
What about coral ardesia and the berry on the coral ardesia?
That's a definite invasive, so please get rid of
Birds,
it.
it's a no-no for birds.
I'm sorry?
If I have it in my yard already, is it bad for birds and dogs?
Well, it will crowd out other native plants. I mean, you can start small. I mean, just dig some of it up and replace it with native plants. I mean, like I said, I don't want you to have to transform your entire yard in one season, but once you know that something's invasive, you can start getting rid of it and then, plant it with something native instead. I mean, let me say this, a lot of my knowledge has come from things that have popped up in my yard and I didn't know what it was. So before I went to pull it out, I identified it and realized that it was native, so I let it be. So there's a great app for your phone in case you want to write that down. It's called Seek by iNaturalist. And you take a picture of the plant and it will identify it and whether it's native or introduced. So that can help you make a decision too, rather than running to a book and thumbing through the book.
And what local nurseries do have a lot of these native plants in pots?
There's a couple places that have some native plants. The Plant Place Nursery on Fort Caroline, the Southern Horticulture Nursery in St. Augustine. If you're really ambitious, you can drive down to Chiappini Farms. They have a huge inventory. Native and uncommon plants, I think, will order stuff for you. But I would, and we're also, and this is a plug, of course, Ixia is having our native plant sale on April 9th. And so all of us that have native plants in our yard are busily potting them up for you people, for people to buy. So that's another source.
And someone mentioned, Kate says that there'll be 2 native plant vendors at our March 3rd
great, thank you. Yes.
horticulture program.
Yes, thank
So
you.
put that on your calendar, 5:30, March 3rd here at the Garden Club.
Yep.
And the app that you mentioned, it was iNaturalist.
It's called Seek.
Seek,
And
S-E-E-K.
S-E-E-K by iNaturalist. And it's free, by the way.
Free app, wonderful.
It's a free app.
All right, so until we get another question in the audience, I'm going to ask another one here. So what was the second fern you listed? Asparagus fern and
Boston fern.
Boston
It's
fern.
also, I think, called the common sword fern, but it's everywhere. I walk through my neighborhood and just shake my head.
All right, we have another question. Marilyn asks, any idea what effect do prescribed burns of forests have on insect populations?
Wait, say again? I'm sorry.
Prescribed burns of forests, like, do you know what effect they might have on insect populations? Are you familiar with any of that? Basically, as a way to maintain forests, and because normally like there should be natural forest fires that happen on occasion. So prescribed burns are supposed to help with that.
Yes, they do. Well, the prescribed burns, and believe me, I know very little about this, but they allow other native plants to grow. Some plants will only grow after burning such as that. Their seeds, I think, were burst by the fire, but I mean, for birds, there aren't necessarily any plants that are tied to that for them, or insects tied to that for them. They eat a lot of different types of insects. So again, they're generalists in that sense. They don't have one specific insect that they eat.
This is kind of ironic, the timing of coming here. I am actually in the process of taking up parts of my yard, and we have attempted to do the natural, just see what grows when it grows. It's not doing very well. My yard has become basically dollar weed, sickly dollar weed or pennywort, along with a lot of sand. And we attempted to plant zoysia grass years ago, and it did not do well. So I'm actually in the process of wanting to eliminate probably half of my yard and put down pine straw and plant native plants. So what is the best way? Again, we are anti roundups too. And other than, we're thinking about putting down black plastic to try and kill the dollar weed or pennywort, and then just leave pine straw down to try and not have grass or whatever is growing there. Do you have any suggestions for a way to, is pine straw an okay?
Yeah, pine
mulch?
straw is fine. I mean, you know, especially like from the native pine trees, yeah, that's fine. Pine
Okay.
straw is perfect.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, I would say start small. I mean, it can be very frustrating to convert your yard because, you know, you want a big tree immediately. Well, that doesn't happen. Or you want the plants to be lush and green the first year. That won't necessarily happen. You know, gardening, of course, requires a lot of patience. And that's why if you just put one shrub in this year, or if you just put in a couple of plants in a small area, like coneflower, for example, or blanket flower, or perhaps the horizontal blue porterweed, you know, just start from there. On the other hand, let me say this. I belong to the Rebo Garden Club, and they complain to me that their native plants are taking over, that they're invasive. I said, well, they're not invasive, they're taking over, which is good. But I mean, the other thing is too, if you have a plant in a spot you don't want it, you can take it out. You know, again, you can still make your yard very pretty. If you don't want a spiderwort in one corner, you can move it. You know, I mean, I spend a lot of time outside weeding as such, but that means digging things up, moving them to another part of the yard, you know, rearranging things and weeding. Unfortunately, in Florida, weeding is, as you well know, 365 days of the year, regardless of the weather. And sometimes it just requires digging. You just have to dig it up to get rid of it. I wish there was a magic way, but there really isn't. I hope that answered your question. We can talk more later.
I have a question about native milkweed. Why is it so hard to find, and where can we find it? It is hard to find.
There are many different, there's probably 100 different species of native milkweed all over the United States. It's very hard to grow because it has a very long tap root. Then the milkweed that's available in the big box stores is the tropical milkweed.
Right.
The Plant Place Nursery does have some native milkweed there. I believe they've had showy milkweed, and I can't remember another one, but it's just, again, unfortunately, with that plant, it takes a lot of patience. There's also butterfly weed. There's a number of different plants that you can use other than just the native milkweeds.
I've used Buddleia.
I'm sorry,
I've used Buddleia before. That's isn't that the butterfly bush? I've used
that's
that.
not native, that's invasive.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Well, they always die
unfortunately, it's very
anyway.
beautiful, but it's
Yeah.
invasive.
Really?
Yes.
So where is this plant place? And you might have said
Oh,
that
it's on
earlier.
Fort Caroline Road.
Yeah, it's Fort
near-
Caroline near University. So just a couple of stores off of University. So Fort
Okay.
Caroline.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a huge nursery. It's been there for a long time. It's gone through, I think it's only had 3 owners in its lifetime, which is kind of amazing.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but call them first to see when they have it in stock, but they do have,
Okay, okay.
you know, I mean, right now they might not have it yet
Okay.
because they might be growing it,
Sure.
but they do have native milkweed there.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
All right, we have a couple of questions on Zoom. Let's see. So yes, so somebody asked what the local places were again. So we talked about the Plant Place Nursery on Fort Caroline Road. And what was the other one that you were
Southern
mentioning?
Horticulture in St. Augustine. But again, I would call first. I don't want to send people off on a goose chase if they don't have anything yet.
Yep.
You know, because it's just the beginning of February.
So someone is asking about Mexican petunias.
Invasive,
Invasive.
please get rid of it.
Yes.
It is beautiful, but it's,
So, one thing, there's invasive and then there's like, if you had a plant that you love the look of, if you planted it in a pot so that it wouldn't take over,
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
that's
yes,
a compromise.
yes, I'm not a purist. I mean, they're wonderful cultivars I like too. But yes, that's a good idea. And invasive, if you really love it, put it in a pot. But but Mexican petunia is pretty sneaky. I've seen,
Yeah, you have to be vigilant.
you have to be vigilant with it. It might sneak out and show up in your yard somewhere.
We have someone asking, I have Boston ferns taking over everything. Could I rid them using a stump grinder? It's a big area.
Do you have any teenage children that need to make money?
So young, healthy people who could.
The Boston fern is, I don't know. That's a really good question, but I mean, the only way to get it out is just to get, you're going to have to make sure you get the little white tubular ends of it, because if you just get the top, it will grow back. So you really have to use, I have a root slayer shovel that I use. My neighbor has it, so I'm always over there fighting it for her. She's great, by the way, letting me do her yard as well.
Free labor, I think that's a great deal.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
just, unfortunately, once it gets in there, it's so hard to get rid of. That's why if we can, prevent you from even planting it, that's half the battle, but it's very hard to get rid of.
Right, any other questions in the audience? I'm going to check here and see if I find it. I think Kate Hurlbut, who is a really great resource. She is the president of the Ixia Chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. They're one of our partners on the horticulture program next month. And they'll be here to be on the panel. So she's been putting in lots of great information on here. Nick Friedman, who has also been a presenter at a horticulture program in the past. He is a native landscaper who has a company called Waka Pilatka. That's WACCA wakapilatka.com. And he's a landscape designer who can design your whole yard or some part of it using native plants. And he was also one of the architects of the native plant parks. There's native park 1 and 2 in Avondale, Riverside Avondale, that are really great examples of great native plantings that you can go enjoy and see what's there. And I think there's some little educational things that say what some of those plants are as
We're
well.
also always looking for volunteers to help us maintain it. So you're certainly welcome to come.
Yeah.
We'd love to see you there.
How do we get rid of feral cats? The city won't come and take them away. even if you catch it?
To me, perfectly blunt, they need to be put to sleep. That's,
Well, the biggest thing that you can do, I mean, it won't solve the problem that you have with the cat right now, but is trap and release. Get them spayed and neutered so that they can't reproduce. No More Homeless Pets has a really great program where they will come and capture your cat, spay or neuter it, release it again. So you'll still have the cat, but at least the reproduction stops there.
but
You know, I love cats. We own cats. They're indoor cats. So no birds are getting harmed. You know, yeah, it's a real problem. And I know that there's some statistic about how cats, you know,
they
their interaction
kill
with birds.
millions of birds every year. The thing is, I mean, I understand that program, but the problem is you're going to release them back into the environment and they're going to kill more birds again. You know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you're not
Well,
taking
that's
responsibility for it. You're asking them to come and capture it and spay or neuter it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will release it.
Actually, bells don't work. The cats, yeah, there is a collar that I've read about that's a flashing light. Because birds, I mean, cats can walk very silently with a bell on. I know, I've had cats forever. They're all indoor cats. But the flashing light, the bird will see too. So.
Well, that's
and
an interesting possibility.
Yeah, that's, and there was a website that had that, and I don't know how popular it's been, but that's the only other thing I can think of other than to not have them in the environment, period. Really, it's a huge, huge, huge problem. Like I said, it's the second leading cause of our loss of millions of birds every year.
Yeah, I guess the other option, this is not a great option, but you know, you can feed them so that they don't look for other food sources,
It
but
doesn't matter.
I
if
don't
you
think that
feed-
helps.
No, it doesn't help.
Yeah.
They'll eat anyway. I know I have 2 cats. I feed them all the time and they're still
Yeah.
looking for stuff in the house.
yeah.
Like lizards. They love lizards, which I save all the time.
All right, do you have one last, you know, wrap up words of wisdom that you want to impart before we?
Like I said, please don't use Roundup, and write to your legislators to have a Roundup banned, please. We need to get that off the market. I mean, we need to save our insect populations. That is so critical for bird populations to survive. And just start small with your yard. That's the only other thing I can say is just, if you do one thing for me, don't use Roundup. So thank you for having me.
All right, so give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen again. And remind you that you can get in touch with Jody through the Ixia chapter, ixia.fnpschapters.org or ixiachapter@gmail.com. And I'm just going to give you a few parting messages here. We have another bird program coming up, but this one is for children in grades 1 through 6. Winter Birds is on February 12th, so a week from Saturday. Children and their families can learn what birds need to stay alive and healthy throughout the winter months in Florida. There'll be a whole bunch of activities and educational opportunities to learn about birds on February 12th. So sign up if you have children or grandchildren. It's a great opportunity to teach them about birds and do something fun on a Saturday morning. We have the flea market coming up at the end of the month. February 26th is the main event. This whole ballroom will be turned into so much stuff you won't believe it. So much stuff to go through. One person's trash is another person's treasure, and it is the ultimate reflection of reuse and recycle. Keep these items out of the landfill, come and give them a second life. So this room will be filled with awesome stuff. We'll have tables out on the porch as well. And the whole club room, our other little building back there, will be a fashion boutique filled with clothes. So if you like to shop at thrift stores, this is a great opportunity. And there's a preview party the night before, February 25th. Buy your ticket to get in to get the best stuff, or if you're a member, you get in free. So you can become a member, and that's a great perk. It'll pay for your membership right there. We also have our big plant sale coming up at April 9th. Blooms Galore More, the Garden Club cultivates, raises, propagates all sorts of plants. Our members bring in and we sell them to help support the Garden Club. So that's really great, but we also invite in all sorts of plant vendors that sell, I mean, there's gonna be so many plants here, you won't believe it. We'll also have a ballroom filled with environmentally themed vendors that make soap and honey and all sorts of great stuff. So check that out, that's April 9th, and the preview party the day before is April 8th. And then one more, we have our designer distinction program. Eileen Thompson is an amazing farm to table flowers. You've heard about farm to table food. Well, this is about flowers and how locally grown flowers are really important to the ecology and biology and economy. Really help take some of the sting out of climate change, and because all the expense, all the resources that are spent on bringing flowers to market when they could be just grown very locally is a really great thing. So designer distinction, Eileen is out of Orlando and she'll be speaking here on April 28th. We would love for you to take our survey. We'll send it out to you by email if you registered in advance. You can also use this QR code if you are at home or here, you can take a picture of that, or we also have it here on the table. So take a couple of minutes, take our survey. We really want your feedback about this program and to give us ideas for future programs. I'd like to thank the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund once again for their support of this program, and thank all of you for being here. Thank Jody once again, my colleague Daniel. And again, if you weren't here, we would just be talking to ourselves, and that is just no fun. So thank you for making this a little better for us. All right, have a great rest of your day and a great week. Thank you.